Good morning, and thanks so much for tuning in to Stocks to Watch on BloombergQuint. I'm Mathew. My guest today is Astha Jain of Him Securities. Good morning, Astha, and thanks so much for joining me today. I want to start by asking you about the aviation companies. And all things considered, they haven't had a very bad run in 2020, irrespective of the impact of the pandemic, right? But the latest update is that Tata Sons is going to be increasing its stake in Air Asia India to 83.67% from the earlier 51%. And this is by an acquisition of Air Asia Investment Stake, which is the wholly owned subsidiary of the Malaysian company that is Air Asia, for about $37.66 million. And the only reason I bring this up in the context of aviation companies is this indicates that the Tata Group is quite willing to pump money into this venture. Could this mean that there's going to be added pressure, especially for the likes of SpiceJet, which has had quite a good run? In fact, I think about 33 odd percent gained for the year so far. Would you take money off the table at this point?
Good morning, Alex. First of all, talking about the aviation sector, yes, this news is very important. But our view is that, the kind of pandemic, the kind of impact that the pandemic has created, we expect that the aviation company will reach to the volume from volume wise perspective, they will reach to the pre-COVID level after at least 12 to 18 months. So right now, this news will be of not that much great impact because the competition, whatever we will be seeing, it will be in the longer run only. While in the shorter term, I think this is a positive news on the Tata Sons front because it will be adding one more segment to their portfolio. So from the Tata Sons perspective, this news is positive. But for the aviation sector as a whole, even this news is positive. But for the competition perspective, I think the things will take time to shape up, at least 12 to 18 months from now, because right now the focus of all the aviation companies is on their cash conservation or the balance sheet conservation rather than the growth. So these steps will really, show their impact in the longer term. So for now, I think SpiceJet will not get that much impacted from this movement, although we can see some sort of price pressure was there. But in the medium to long term, I still think that SpiceJet will be giving somewhere around 10 to 15% returns, at least from the 3 to 6 months perspective. This is I'm talking about.
Understood. All right. Let's get the aviation companies, which brings me to the banking sector. And yesterday there was a report that was released by the Reserve Bank of India that talked about that warned of a spike in bad loans after the relief measures wind down. They've essentially said that because of the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic and the real economic impact, the asset quality of the banking system may deteriorate sharply. And they've even said that if it wasn't for the 6-month moratorium and the other measures introduced, certain leading banks would have had GNPA ratios that were higher by 16 or rather 19 to 60 basis points. So really the question that I have for you is, considering the kind of run that we've had so far, any negative surprises could actually jolt some of these banks really hard. So which are the more resilient banks in the bank Nifty that you would bet on in the new year?
Yeah, sure. See, talking about this news in particular, first of all, we are expecting that SMA zero account, the share of SMA zero account will definitely see I should say, increase post this lifting of moratorium, that is after August 31. But the mostly, I think, the banks which will be really get impacted by this news are the tier two banks, because for the tier one bank or the large cap bank like HDFC Bank or Kotak Mahindra Bank in particular, their GNP and NNP ratios are already very low as compared to other private sector banks. So these banks will be getting less impacted. And another thing which we are really focusing right now, because this deadline for restructuring proposal is also fast approaching, as well as with this lifting of this asset quality standstill, we are really thinking that the low tier two banks or the low mid cap, low size bank will really get impacted because their asset quality will get impacted as well as their future income will get impacted. But for the top banks, that is HDFC and Kotak Mahindra Bank, we are feeling that these banks are resilient and we are still positive on these banks. And in fact, ICICI Bank is also looking good to us. So these three banks are really looking resilient at present point of time in the wake of this news. And we are still positive on these banks. For HDFC Bank, our target is 1600. For ICICI Bank, it is around 550. And for Kotak Mahindra Bank, we are still positive with the target price of 2200 to 2250.
Understood. And we also see that several of these large banks have actually had capital raises to sort of insulate themselves from any possible losses on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's talk about the third stock, Astha, which is Indraprastha Gas. There isn't a news-based development, but the stock is trading very strong. It is trading higher than all of its simple moving averages. If you look at from the 5-day to the 200 days. So what do you think about this counter, the prospects for it from this point? Do you think that valuations perhaps a slight bit stressed at this point, and therefore would you advise taking some money off the table?
See, from analyst point of view, we always look after the intrinsic value, that is the future earnings which any stock can deliver. So, talking about Indraprastha case, what happens on this counter is that we are expecting, because they are opening and they have the plans to open 50 to 60 CNG stations every year from FY21 to FY25. So, I mean, these plans will really add to the volumes, and therefore, I mean, if the volume will get increased, definitely the margins and the financial performance will also get increased, and therefore the future earnings are looking very strong on this counter. So looking after all these things, we think that if anyone has a shorter term perspective, then they can book a small quantity of their holding. That is, if they have a suppose 100 share, then they can book profit in the 25 shares. But for remaining 75 shares, we are still positive on the stock, and our price target for the same is 550 to 580 in the longer run. So we still maintain hold on this.
Understood. You, Astha. Thanks so much for taking the time and for taking us through those three ideas this morning.
Thank you.
And to you, dear viewer, I hope that this conversation was useful to you. Do stay tuned. There's lots more coming up in just a short while on BloombergQuint.